Oh, good afternoon and happy holidays, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Maryfran Johnson, CEO of Maryfran Johnson Media. Twice a month, we produce CIO Leadership Live with the gracious support of my friends at CIO.com and the CIO Executive Council. We're streaming live to you right now on LinkedIn and on our own CIO channel on YouTube. And we welcome any of our viewers who have dialed in today to join in this conversation with questions of your own. One of our editors will be watching for those questions and doing their best to pass it along to me. My guest today, which I'm so happy to welcome, is Gary Jeter, who is the Executive Vice President and CTO of the TruStone Financial Credit Union. TruStone Financial started out more than 80 years ago as the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers Credit Union. It's based in Plymouth, Minnesota, and the credit union started expanding across the Midwest during those 80 plus years, and in 2020 joined with the Firefly Credit Union in a merger of equals that created the second largest credit union in the state of Minnesota. Today, they serve 200,000 of their member owners, and they're managing $4.3 billion in assets. Gary joined the organization in 2019, right before the big merger took place. And as the CTO, he played a significant leadership role in helping that make happen. Since then, Gary has been leading TruStone's digital transformation strategy, which we'll be talking about in some depth today. And he's also done unusual and active things like partnering with a trio of fintech startups in the digital banking space. Prior to his current role, Gary held IT leadership roles in a number of Fortune 500 firms across several other industries, including healthcare, insurance, aircraft engines, and commercial finance, where he's working at companies such as Optum, United Health, Ceridian, and GE Capital. And then way before that, he spent 9 years in the military as a helicopter pilot. Gary, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mary Fran. I'm just thrilled to be here.
Now, let's start out after I just mentioned all of those large companies that you spent much of your IT leadership career at, and wondered what drew you to the mid-size or smaller companies, especially in the not-for-profit kind of community and mission-driven space of credit unions. Tell us about that transition.
Yeah, it's been a really fun transition, and it's really been a lot of great work. So I really got pulled into it. Our CEO Dale Turner, who's actually a visionary, it's great. He was looking at basically doing a very, very large merger of equals, and at the time it was the largest merger of equals. And looking from somebody that had kind of enterprise scale to kind of jump in and help lead the merger across the board. So help led the merger. Our official operations day one was March 2021. So it was a lot of prep in 2020 to be able to make that happen. And since then, haven't really looked back. It's nice to be in a smaller company versus Fortune 500. Definitely great experience. It's a different skill set, I guess, if you will. Jumping into this role, it's been absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. Well, and this is your first official CIO role. The others have been VPs, senior VPs, much bigger teams, but not where the buck stops and the one throat to choke.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is a lot of fun being the one throat to choke. So when I was at United Health Group, I led just a massive team that was global, 1,300 employees across the globe, and certainly learned a lot of great experiences to scale and great leadership team there. But moving into a smaller organization like TruStone, reporting to the board of directors on a monthly basis, setting the strategy for technology, and then moving very, very quickly has been really, really a lot of fun across the board.
Well, and those the qualities and the capabilities that you brought to a merger of these two equals, essentially to create the second largest credit union. Where did a lot of that experience come from? Because you've been at finance companies, but you were in technology roles. So what was it that you brought to the table there?
Well, I think it's a lot of process type skills as well as technology. So when we dove into the merger, we were essentially looking at it impacted everything within the credit union. There's about 600 employees combined. So each credit union had 300 employees. So we doubled in size.
Yeah.
So it's really a function of how do we evaluate the technology, which is the best? Is it and we had to look at it from an architecture view as well as a process and team member or employee point of view as far as what's going to serve them for the members. And so we didn't always choose best in breed because again, learning from the past, best in breed, when you stitch it together, a lot of times that turns into a Frankenstein. But we did look at what's going to best support our members, what's going to best support our team members, serving our members to remove friction, evaluating that in a very objective criteria. And then selecting it and then looking at ways through the merger, how do we integrate that? How do we make it successful? And we had a very short time period from legal day one to operations day one.
No, you did it very quickly.
Yeah, really, really, really quick. It was January 1st, 2021 was our legal day one. And we essentially had 2 months to pull a lot of the technology together, particularly the technologies that our members were using and the technology that our team members were using. And the infrastructure a lot of the infrastructure was pushed off later. So 59 days.
Well, and
a lot of fun. And so large enterprise experiences help drive that.
Yeah. Well, and you were also doing this during what I think we all look back on now as that dreadful year of 2020, where we were in the depth of the pandemic then, hoping it would be totally in the rearview mirror by now, and it isn't completely, but there was still so much we didn't know in 2020. Did that present any particular, that must have presented some new problems for you because you hadn't lived through a pandemic before. None of us had.
Very true. Yeah, it was it was a little crazy. we essentially credit unions very relationship based. When you look at a $2 billion credit union, relatively small, everything was on site. There was some virtual workers, but not a ton. It was not the norm across. So the pandemic essentially accelerated our digital transformation. So unified communication, bringing in video, Zoom, essentially making that successful. And then also from a cultural perspective, getting employees used to working remotely. So we closed down our branches. We looked at from a technology perspective, how do we provide, capabilities that improve our member experience and they can bank virtually. It was great, actually. So in the past, I would say probably 70% was done in the branches. From a digital transformation perspective, that completely switched.
Of course.
So, and that happened very quickly. And doing the merger virtually was very hard too. So
a
lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of different skills that.
I can imagine. Well, I know we're going to talk in greater depth about the talent you have on staff and the customers and who they are and what they look for. But first, I want to ask you this is a newer industry for you, the credit union business, but you've been in it now for 3 years. So take us up to kind of a 30,000-foot view and talk about what now that we're getting into 2023 next month. When we look back at the last 3 years, what is the big picture about the impact on the credit union business as an industry, and also some of the highlights of what it affected at TruStone?
So, from a 30,000-foot perspective, again, the pandemic really drove the digital transformation to make sure we provided the technology to members to be able to transact with their finances virtually. And then also from a team member perspective, making significant changes to make sure they had the technology and remove the friction across the board so that they could serve our members effectively. It's been a It's been a little bit of a whiplash because from the pandemic, there were a lot of deposits. So lending was a big focus within the credit union.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, as we're ending the recession, lending is picking up. So now it's a focus of deposits to make sure we're strong to be able to provide the effective lending to members. I'm coming out of a healthcare background, employee assistance program background. It's been a ton of fun stepping into the financial industry over these last 3 years. I'll tell you, because of the amount of fintechs, innovation that's being created from these small startups, and how they deliver value and how you tie that into your digital landscape and the digital channel.
Okay.
It's been so much fun.
Okay, well, let's dive into that. Let's talk about, well, before we talk about fintechs and your landscape, tell us about your customer base. Do they have, I've had so many CIOs that talk about the Amazon effect, the fact that everybody assumes they can Google something, go into Amazon, buy it, have it to them. So we've got, the populace in general is sometimes 2 steps ahead of some businesses that are in the process of transforming digitally. So talk about what your customer base has looked for from TruStone that you're now able to do with the transformation you have underway.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So today, if you look at the average person, they have relationships with 30 different financial institutions, credit cards and things like that. And then if you look at their mobile phone, they have 13, on average, 13 different mobile apps that interact with their different financial institutions.
Huh.
So what does that mean, right? So that means that there is a one size fits none. So what was in the past, there was your preferred primary financial institution. Well, that whole concept's changed. It's now your preferred financial institution. So from a technology perspective, it's really all about embedding the right fintechs to be able to remove friction and be able to serve members. And so the credit union ourselves, we don't necessarily have to create and provide all these products and services. But what we do need to do to remain their preferred financial institution is we need to pull in the fintechs that are the best to be able to serve those members and deliver the value that they expect. And so open banking is huge across the board, being able to stitch these things together. And so that's driven a lot of innovation within fintechs in the US. And then if you go overseas, you look over in Europe, you look in Asia, they're ahead of us. They're ahead of us from a fintech payments perspective. And so there's a lot of models that are being brought to bear that we can learn and benchmark overseas, as well as the massive number of fintechs that are coming together.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I know that the starting that involvement, you've got 3 particular fintechs that you have embedded now and that are on board, and I want to talk about those. But first, tell us about what the scope of your digital transformation. I know that you've modernized the architecture, you've created new roles on staff, that sort of stuff. Give us the big picture on what you've done as part of this modernization.
Yeah, so here at TruStone, we've looked at it in 3 main pillars. The one is modernizing our architecture. So looking at the cloud to be able to provide scalability and dynamic bursting, if you will. API-led first type infrastructure, because you have to stitch things together. And so we brought in a integration platform as a service, which has been very, very effective. Boomi is the name of the platform. Data and then security are all part of that technology modernization. The second pillar is about embedding fintechs. So my team isn't necessarily going out and developing those front ends, but it's taking those integration opportunities to tie it into our digital channel. So looking out, embedding fintechs. I have a VP of innovation. So he goes out to these conferences. He does research to basically look at what are the technologies and fintechs that we can bring to bear to best serve our members and team members. And then the third pillar is all about our product management council and our agile transformation. And
Yes.
that's two things. One, it's the process of doing agile, but it's also the culture of bringing that forward to agile to all of the employees. And so that ties right into our values of continuous improvement, simplification, and the whole concept that the people that are closest to the work are in the best position to improve the work. And so that's been really successful from a digital transformation perspective, and a very, very important pillar. So three
Yeah.
pillars.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit more about well, a little bit about security, because I know that that's always a big important pillar. It's usually the one that most CIOs don't want to get into a lot of details about. Understand that, but I think it's very interesting that you're using a kind of a CSO as a service approach to what you do with security. Tell us about that and kind of how that came to pass. Is this something new for you? Had you worked this way previously at some of the bigger companies?
Yeah. So one thing I want to say about security is from a credit union banking perspective, one of the foundations of trust is being able to protect members. In the past, it used to be members or customers would bring money to the bank, right? From a physical security, here's your dollars. Today, it's all about data. And so from a financial institution, how do we protect their data? How do we make sure that we allow them control of their data? And that's a key aspect of open banking. And making sure we have the tools in place to do that from a controls and then also from a security perspective. So we've done a lot of investment in our security to harden the walls, to basically tighten the keys, those type of things to protect customers. When we first came together, smaller institution, $4 billion, $4+ billion in assets, hiring on a full-time CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, is something we're eventually, once we grow a little bit bigger, we're going to do. But there's but starting out, essentially, we have an information security officer on staff, but we use an external party that provides our CISO as a service. So every week we meet, we walk through an agenda. They evaluate us from where we sit from security. So they're removed, if you will. In large companies, the CISO doesn't report into IT. A lot of times that goes through and compliance. So that separation, if you will, is maintained by using that CISO as a service. And we use Ongoing Operations, which is a great company that provides that to us. And the CISO reports every quarter to our supervisory committee. So it really I really appreciate it because it holds us accountable. They're evaluating us. They don't necessarily report to me or my IT department, but we're very closely in lockstep protecting member data. And we want to maintain the trust with our members. It's super important.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about your staff now. There's 600 employees at TruStone, and your IT staff is about 50. Once the merger took place, what did you change? How did you reorganize things? What were the new roles that you created?
Well, when we did the merger, it was almost like peanut butter and chocolate, from Reese's, because each credit union, if you will,
You're saying the merger tasted great, huh?
Yeah, well, it was great. There were some challenges, like all mergers, but as far from a technology perspective, the Firefly team essentially had a data analytics organization, which was very strong, or is very strong. On the TruStone side, they had a development organization, which was lacking on the Firefly side. So when we came together, that basically helped round out the team. Now, some of the new roles that we brought, enterprise architecture, solution architects, that didn't exist before. But to be able to set that strategy, to make sure the technologies that we bring in, having an enterprise architect, having a solution architect that truly helps monitor that and focuses us to scale and to growth, has been a critical position across the board. I mentioned the VP of innovation. That was a huge aspect too, which is tied to our solution architect and enterprise architect. So those were part of it. We've done some reorganizations as well. We've created an enterprise application support organization. We're all pretty much in-source from infrastructure and operations.
Mhm.
And so it's a full spectrum IT team. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think you mentioned too that you've had some real big success in terms of when we start talking about talent and finding it and retaining it, that you've done a good bit of bringing people in from other business units in the company. Like you mentioned, one of the tellers who is now part of application development or application support, maybe it was. How have you made your IT operation look like a great place to transfer over to?
Well, first, no credit really goes to me. I would
Oh,
look at
darn.
my leaders. So I have such an amazing leadership team that's just been absolutely brilliant across the.
Mhm.
Certainly have loved that organization. And so one of the things we've been able to do within technology is one, really live our values from a culture perspective. So
Okay.
really looking at collaboration and things like that. So I think that's all of TruStone does that, but I think that's been a big aspect within technology. So we've got a great culture, which is really set by my senior leadership team. So
Mm-hmm.
that makes it attractive. The second is leadership or career tracks. One of the nice things is having a larger technology team. This didn't always exist when we were smaller, but there's
Mm-hmm.
a growth path, and we've been able to take from the call center, which is outside of IT, moving
Mm-hmm.
our help desk, move them to a desktop engineer, and then move them into application support or move them into infrastructure, more of
Yeah.
that level 3 type thing. So that's been attractive to attracting talent. And then it's the product management council. So when we look at our agile transformation, all of the product owners sit in the
Mm-hmm.
business other than the technology like security.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm.
And those folks have an opportunity, a really good view into IT. And so working, with their employees or their own experiences, they come over. So I talked about the teller coming over. We
Mm-hmm.
had a great employee coming from operations who was part of the product management council as
Mm-hmm.
far as kind of continuing to build his career track. Um, we've had a number of folks throughout the business, and I think you know it's been a great opportunity for folks that know the business and also great talent that are very technology savvy uh, to grow. So
Yeah.
hire
Um,
hire leaders, train skills.
yeah. Well, I had one CIO I interviewed who had a wonderful description for it and talked about one of the focuses for this CIO was to keep re-recruiting the talent they had. Every time I used to, a couple years ago, you'd ask about how do you find and hire great talent. Now the question is often the first question is how do you keep the great people you've got? And that idea about re-recruiting them every day. I know this will resonate with you because I've some of the articles where you've been quoted in before you talked about servant leadership. Where does that come from for you, and what does it mean?
I think where it comes from for me is actually a lot of the training I had in the military.
Mm.
When you look at leading a squadron of helicopters and
Mm.
soldiers, um, making sure that they are well prepared, their families are well prepared, and doing whatever is needed to be able to make them and the mission successful. And
Mm-hmm.
so that whole servant leadership, and I was very fortunate and lucky to be able to serve in the military, um, was really the foundation of
Okay.
leaders within the Army. And carrying that forward has been kind of a foundation of my own leadership style.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas as a leader, you need to provide the environment, you need to provide the tools, you need to provide the skills for employees to thrive. Everyone comes into work, they want to make a difference. And so one other example I would say is from a training and development. We have a very large training and development budget. And in technology, as everyone that's watching and listening knows, if you're not training and learning skills, you're falling behind.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is a hockey stick as far as really what's happening with technology. So we send our team members to certifications. They go to conferences. They have lots of opportunities to not only develop their professional skills from a leadership perspective, but also their technical skills.
Yes.
And this technology transformation has provided a lot of exciting opportunities for our employees.
Yeah. Well, when we talked about talent earlier, too, you mentioned that when you do lose a member of the staff who decides to go somewhere else, you know, maybe a for-profit business, maybe it's for a bigger salary or they move to a bigger town, you like to feel like you've sent them out the door, the very best trained person and talent that, you know, essentially a showcase for the sort of talent that you're developing there. And it sounds like they might, after they do that for a while, they might come back. Have you had that happen yet?
We have. You know, one of the things I tell my employees at our town halls, right, is like, I want you to stay with us forever.
Yes.
But if you leave, you know, one, I don't want you running away. I want you to be running two to grow your skill. And I want TruStone IT to be that organization that creates the best technologists within the industry. And whether that technology goes to, because technology IT is a very fungible skill, so they
sure is
all over the place. And we've had some team members come back, which is great. They go out, they learn some more skills, and they come back and for our members. So I love it.
What are some of the top training areas that your staff are most interested in? I know I read in one of the articles that you were interviewed, you talked a lot about data scientists. Yeah. And it's so hard to find them. It's certainly hard to afford them and hire them. So I'm assuming that data science areas might be one, but correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're right. You know, one of the things our data analytics team, you know, we're building the foundation with a data catalog and prep and a master data management platform. Again, that's Boomi, which has been great. It ties into our iPass very well. But evolving and growing to more of that data science organization. So in the short term, like last year, we partnered with the University of Minnesota. There's a analytics lab. We brought in a team, and they're all graduate students with varying levels of experience to take a look at a real world, very important initiative and create some of the models. And so that's been a showcase, not only for the data analytics team, but also the other executives, executive vice presidents, as far as what data analytics can do. So that's one example. We do others, you know, within our infrastructure, getting Azure and AWS certified for developing, especially in security, getting our information security team through the different certifications that are out there. When I first stepped in, getting everyone ITIL certified so we can really run with a common language when we're talking about incident management, problem management, those type of things. So those are some examples. And like I said, we have this is the one area of the budget for training and development I fight for every year.
That's great. Well, and it sounds like you fight very successfully, and that your leadership, you had mentioned that your CEO is very tech savvy. So you don't have to keep re-explaining why it's important to keep up with training courses and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. Dale Turner is really a visionary. Came from San Diego. He was with Firefly as the CEO. Probably a year, 2 years before I joined the organization. And he's a younger guy, and he's really kind of bringing a leaning forward in with technology. So very, very fortunate there. The board of directors too, you know, working with board of directors, setting strategy. We've got a great board of directors. And that's been very, very fortunate. We have a number of CIOs that are on the board of directors, which is very, very helpful. And they not only can advocate, but they also ask very, very good questions to me and the other executive vice presidents to basically protect our members. So it's been good.
And speaking of those members, I mentioned in your intro that there's 200,000 and they're member owners. And for any of our audience that isn't familiar with not-for-profit credit union and the structures, when we call them member owners, what do we mean exactly? And I bet the board is all a number of those member owners.
Yeah, it is different.
Yeah.
Stepping out of a for-profit organization, going into a not-for-profit. And this has been really refreshing and great for me. So the
Yeah.
board of directors are all members. They're volunteers. They're not paid. They bring different skill sets professionally across, where they worked in the industry to be able to help govern the organization. The 200,000 members all have shares with the organization. So we're with the credit union, they have to have a share savings account to start, just $5 to get it going. But with that, they're voting members. So when we merged, they voted on whether we merged or not. Or when we do major changes, that is sent out to all of the members that have an opportunity to provide a voice to it. And we're truly member focused, customer first, because they own us. The other thing I'd say, not for profit, we're not a charity, we're a not for profit. So a lot of the things that we do is essentially we run a very strong credit union from a finance perspective. The difference is we give that back to our members. So when you look at the products we provide relative to checking, CDs, interest, car loans, those type of things, we can give better rates and we can give nicer products to our members. And we're always looking at that. So if you're not a credit union member, go take a look at it. It's a great opportunity because we, being a not-for-profit, and really, really member focused.
Yeah, and I'll bet
not customers. So.
Well, I'll bet a lot of the people listening remember their first credit union, because when my husband and we lived in Gainesville, Florida, and we were both at University of Florida, and the UF credit union, I think we might actually still be members. I mean, you can hang in over the decades. We probably don't even have very much in the account anymore, but I remember that it's very significant help when you need your very first car loan. And you're 20 years old, and really you're probably not a very good credit risk at that point.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about a they get to we know our members personally, so they come into the branches, they get experience, talk to a loan officer, and we're able to look at it from the perspective of, okay, maybe your credit score doesn't give you that today, but because you're in the community, we know you. Let's take a chance on. Community banks do a lot of the same things.
Sure. Yes. I want to switch horses right now and talk a little bit about digital customer experience, because I know that's something that you brought a lot of expertise with you from the larger companies, but this is actually the first time you've had your hands totally on the wheel of driving the digital customer experience. And you had mentioned that you've brought in industry experts to talk about this. So tell us where you are today with the digital customer experience and where it's going over, say, the next year.
Yeah, so from a digital customer service perspective, one of the things I've been able to do is really reach out into the organization or out into the industry from my own network, and then also the different conferences we go out. So example, back in September, we brought in Rick DeLisi. And for those that don't know Rick DeLisi, he wrote a really great book, highly recommended. It's called Digital Customer Support. He also worked with Harvard Business Review to write white papers on customer effort score. He helped to do it, create that, if you will, as far as the analysis behind it. But essentially bringing that forward and saying, hey, how do we remove friction? Because that's what customer effort score is all about. Which the question is, it's different than Net Promoter Score. Will you recommend? It's how much effort did you put into solving your problem? And the lower effort, the more customer loyalty, if you will. So to do that low effort, you got to have really good, strong technology. So if a member starts a chat, you have a chat bot to answer the easy questions. They can't get the answer, you kick them to a human. And that human could be whether it's a chat or it's picking up our call center going across, and then looking to serve that member. And how do you serve it on a first call resolution? So we're not there yet. We have a ways to go, but in 2023, we're going to be doing investments in digital customer support, omni-channel, if you will, to be able to serve members. But we brought in other fintechs to basically from a digital channel to better serve members, and we successfully did that with a number of in 2022.
Yes. Let's talk about those. Have you at some of your other larger organizations, have you been involved with fintech specifically, or just with managing the relationship with a startup?
So in my other organizations, particularly Optum and United Health Group, we were very big, right? $109 billion, huge. And so
that's a lot of billions.
Yeah, a lot of money. And so you're the 900-pound gorilla that enterprise folks. So worked with very large vendor partners, and which were great. Obviously Microsoft, Oracle, Cisco, a lot of those things, but didn't have an opportunity to deal with a lot of startups. Fast forward, move into TruStone. It's amazing. It's so much fun. There are so many fintech startups now. Not all of them will survive the recession, but a lot of them will. And so we partnered with those, and as we vetted them, we looked at their balance sheets and their pathway to productivity or to and we've been able to really start with some innovative ones. So with Clutch, started out with an auto refinancing application with 6 easy clicks to help folks refinance. And the spirit behind With Clutch, the owner, so talk to the owner, the creator, the innovators.
That's right. You're not dealing with a product salesperson when you're the CIO and it's a startup.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then we've been able to help influence their product roadmap. So it started with auto refinancing. Now we're doing cards and consumer lending, and there's a whole roadmap associated with it. And they're working directly with us and their other customers to be able to say, how do we bring the most value to the organization? So that's been a ton of fun and very, very refreshing, because when I was in Optum, I didn't get a chance to talk to the Microsoft CEO.
Oh, well, true. True.
But it's been
consider how far away from the products would he be? Have you at this point in your career, have you ever served on a board of directors for a startup, or have you been asked to work with any of them?
I have not.
I'll bet that's coming. I'll bet
that would be a lot of fun. I think from a security perspective, I think I can help startups.
What is the process that you take the startups through before they can start working with TruStone? And I ask that keeping in mind that some years ago, I was talking with a CIO of a big biomed company located in the Boston area. And he was similarly, this was probably, maybe around 2010. So it's a while ago. And he was trying to get more startup tech companies involved, but discovering that they had so many legal protections and requirements in mind that by the time the potential startups got through the checklist, none of them could qualify to work with the organization. And he was very frustrated with it. I'm sure it's very different now, but I'll bet you still have a process. Does it go through your product management council? How do you approach it when you get a startup CEO gets in touch with you and says, have I got a great digital product for you? What do you do?
Yeah, so we take a little bit different angle. We really focus on the member, right? What are the pain points that we want to solve? What are those things that are tied out there? And those pain points or those solutions often, or those needs, come from our product management council and our product owner.
Okay.
I would say the other side of the house is that you don't know what you don't know. So our VP of innovation is always out there, kind of looking at technology to be able to say it. Once we identify a fintech that says, you know what, this is going to bring a ton of value to our members, and it's going to solve the pain points that our product management council or capabilities need to be addressed, Then it goes through the vetting process, and there's a standard vetting process where you're looking at SOX 2, doing their financial statements, things like that.
Yeah.
But we have a very forward-thinking legal and compliance office. So there's one thing as far as having an outage and impacting a group of members, and from a perspective, dropping the ball on compliance, that's a multi-million dollar mistake.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
that's a
those
non-starter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we work very closely with compliance. We will work very closely with our legal officer, chief legal officer, and how do we bring these fintechs to bear? And we'll work with the fintech to say, hey, you know what, you're not quite ready. Here are the terms and conditions and your master service agreement that need to be tied in there to be able to be effective. Come back and talk to us later. But again, there are so many fintechs out there. If they're not taking these security precautions, they're not doing the things they need to do. There's another one or two behind them. So
yeah. And do they start that process with TruStone with your VP of Innovation, who I know has an official different title? He's a solution architect.
He's our
he's
solution
kind of
architect.
informally
He's
your
our
VP of
development team.
Innovation. Yeah.
I just call him that because
yeah. How do they start with him? Does he usually vet them before he brings them to you?
He does, right? So he'll go out to conferences. There's fintech meetups, Credit Union 2.0, and he'll look at the different, fintechs that are out there. He'll do some vetting. He's a solution architect. He's been with the Credit Union, I want to say 12 years.
Oh, okay. So really
a lot of different roles, from, mortgage to lending to, starting up organizations within the credit union. So he's very deep as far as what are our processes today, and very knowledgeable on member needs. So he's been really great as far as not wasting time looking at every single fintech that's out there.
Right. I know, because you did mention there's a few of them out there.
Yeah. Yes.
I know. It's just,
yeah.
And you don't want them all calling your cell after this interview.
Yeah, and I would throw there's a couple things as far as fintechs, and there's some amazing out there, but a lot of it's timing, right? So we're at it depends on what our members need, what's going to deliver the most value, and the fintech as they develop, we're aware of them, and then perhaps we want to bring them in later. Crypto, the meltdown, but essentially, that is a product that members are going to want at some point. We push that way down the roadmap, if you will, buy now, pay later, things like that. We're going to do, but it's on the roadmap. It's not something that's right away. So why vet them now? It's more of a just-in-time approach.
Sure. Well, yeah, you have to. I mean, time is a budget somewhere. You have to keep track of that. The three fintechs that are officially embedded now, they're all in your digital banking space. Is that correct?
Yes, for the most part. So one of the things I talked about, compliance, we didn't have a very strong platform before. We vetted a number. We brought in a company called Maryfran, which essentially helps our Bank Secrecy Act and our money fraud prevention organization better manage, identify. So that uses a lot of AI. But when we talk about member-facing fintechs that we brought through, and I mentioned it earlier, WithClutch was one of them that we've helped grow, and they've helped grow across this year. We started in January with them, deployed in March. Digital onboarding, we just turned on. Digital onboarding is a brilliant fintech. They essentially make it just so easy for a new member to, one, enroll in digital banking, go and change their direct deposit to TruStone. So work with the different payroll providers like ADP. So it's not like taking a form to your HR to make those transactions. You can do it very, very quickly and easy for digital onboarding, enrolling in e-statements, card on file or card on record, changing your card to TruStone as far as on the online vendors. So digital onboarding, we've just launched back at the end of October, and we're finding that very, very successful. Wow. And then the foundation of all this is that integration to be able to pull those fintechs, to be able to offer those up. So a lot of work's been worked with Boomi to be able to create reusable APIs
Okay.
that allow a lot of the back office automations in the back office. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking that it sounds relatively straightforward and easy now because of the work you've done with modernizing the architecture. The fact that you're set up to have an API-driven architecture. How much of your infrastructure do you have in the cloud today? And is that something where it's a big move toward more and more of it there, or is it a balance that you're looking to seek? Where are you on cloud strategy?
So right now our cloud strategy is, so it's not a full march to the cloud. Um, it's more of this year we've set up our first Microsoft Azure, so we kind of environment cloud. So we have a third data center, if you will, that's located in. We're starting with disaster recovery. So our immutable backups are stored out in the cloud.
Okay.
Very low, not very expensive as far as the storage, unless you have to pull it out. That's one aspect. We're going to be early next year, we're going to be hosting our first externally facing application in the cloud. Product called CU Nexus, which will be in the background of our digital banking, our site. And then as it makes sense, we'll be building things out into the cloud and migrating some of the workloads to the cloud. Right now, all our data sits within our own data centers. We have a colo. But when we talk about machine learning, we talk about artificial intelligence, those type of things, leveraging the cloud, leveraging those things. So we'll be moving data out there in a secure methodology to make sure that we can leverage a lot of those. And so it's exciting. We've set the foundation.
That's great. I wanted to circle back and talk a little bit more about the Product Management Council, because I'm always fascinated with that, because it's a different approach to managing the whole flow of projects and products that the IT department is working on. And you had mentioned that TruStone, when the merger took place, TruStone didn't have a PMO, a project management office, but Firefly did. But you end up moving to a product management council. And you had mentioned that that was a little more culturally challenging. So tell us about that. What was culturally challenging about that, and how did you resolve everything?
Yeah, so I want to start out to say agile is a journey. So there's no end point. So when you say resolve that, I would say we've moved the needle significantly, and we still have to go. But the approach we've taken is I have a very, very talented global planning and delivery senior vice president, and putting that structure in place, she's done very, very good at. Right. So we have 3 product families. Within those product families, we have product owners. Product owners reside in the business, and product families are member experience, employee experience, and technology experience. And each one of those have anywhere from 6 to 9 products, if you will. So product owner is responsible for the product roadmap. We have a technology owner that's aligned with those product owners, and together they're sitting and creating those roadmaps, creating what adds value to the organization. So having them sit in the organization has been absolutely critical to the success of this. I would say some of the challenges we initially came up with: one, it's a new concept. It's a new concept for a lot of the leadership. It's a new concept for a lot of the executive vice presidents. And I was also fortunate within my previous experience to have gone through a number of agile transformations and made mistakes. And so learnings forward to TruStone. And so there's the equation where I always look at the effectiveness of a solution or the effectiveness of the program is 2 factors. One is the quality of the program. And 2 is the adoption of the program. And so when you look at it from a quality perspective, we have a great structure: stand-ups, releases, product management council, product owners. Now the focus is looking at the acceptance of the solution, right? And the acceptance, we've brought on a organizational change management expert. She's been absolutely brilliant. as far
Okay.
as not just bringing these tools and this structure to do organizational change management, but also training, right? So it's not organizational change management is one person's responsibility, but it's those product owners. And success is measured from our employees, right? Are
Hmm.
employees ready to take some of these capabilities in the future? So
Right.
it's been good. It's been good. We're still working through it. We make continuous improvement opportunity,
Hmm.
and we're continue to drive. It's been a lot.
Yeah. Well, I was also interested in hearing a little more about your internship program or with the University of Minnesota. Was that something that both of the credit unions before the merger were all doing, or is that something newer?
That's new. So one of the things that within Optum, they have a technology development program, which is absolutely
Hmm.
brilliant. But they recruit folks and they give them 2-year rotations. And General Electric had something very similar.
Yeah.
So when we look at talent, we look at skills, right? Partnering with local universities and colleges is just a natural thing for me, because one of the things that I've experienced in the past is um, young talent, when it comes in, they don't understand what can't be done.
Hmm.
So they'll come
Which
in
is
and
good
take a
and
look
bad.
at it. Exactly. And in a past life or a past organization, we wanted to build a chatbot. There were 2 organizations which said it would take a year and multiple $1 million to build it.
Mhm.
This young team that basically came right out of college, they had a working chatbot open source
Mhm.
within 4 months. So it's one of those things
Yeah.
that those barriers and new technologies and new skills has been great. And so
Yeah.
University of Minnesota, hats off to the Carlson Analytics Lab. It's
Hmm.
great.
Well, I may be just imagining this from anecdotal experiences I've had talking to CIOs, but I feel like there is a much greater resurgence now and an interest in these kind of partnerships. And you don't have to be the Bank of America or General Electric to do them. You can be a mid-sized, even a small organization, and be doing internships and apprenticeships and that sort of thing. I think that that pipeline of future tech talent is so incredibly important and so much more viable, I think, than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I totally agree. And
Yeah.
our data analytics team rode shotgun with these folks, had an opportunity for enterprise apps. Our digital banking manager got to be able to have the experience of being a mentor and a champion, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
understanding what's out there as well as growing themselves professionally, it's been
Hmm.
really, really good.
Yeah. When I remember there was a story some years ago and a CIO was telling me about it, and it's a very experienced team, a group of security folks, and they were having a problem, and it was in one of the South American countries, and there were threats, ransomware kind of threats against the company from Anonymous, that organization of the black hat hackers. And
Mhm.
so the team was all talking about it, and they had a student there, a 22-year-old, who said, "Well, why don't I just join them? Like, why don't I sign up and join Anonymous?" And they were all shocked. At first, they said, "Oh my God, no, that's the enemy." And then they suddenly thought, wait a minute, that could, and nobody had thought to look
Yeah,
at it that way. He was like, why don't I just go out and like sign up and join and find out what they're doing?
I love.
And this just, the CIO talked about it years later. She said it was such a moment, an eye opener for her about how the things that you don't, that it's not on the rule book anywhere that you can't do that. And my God, that could work. What a great idea, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's a great example of diversity, right?
Yes,
Diversity.
exactly. A reverse mentoring,
So yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
it's very, very neat. Yeah, great, great.
Now, we mentioned the importance of the huge focus on data. How about things in are you doing anything with a business intelligence platform, or just when you think about strategic tech priorities, business tech priorities for the coming year, what are the top items on your agenda?
So data is huge, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I talked about protecting members' data from a security perspective to
Mm-hmm.
build that trust. Now, the second step in that is how do we make sure our data is accurate, it's consistent,
Mm-hmm.
and we're using that data in a good manner to be able to offer needed services to our members,
Mm-hmm.
right? And giving them the ability to kind of control their data, if you will.
Yeah.
So investments we made last year in Boomi, we've doubled down as far as operating, doing that. So data catalog and prep has been huge in
Mm-hmm.
kicking off our data governance program, where business experts, along with our data team, are doing data lineage, data definitions, data catalogs, those type of things. And the platform's been very helpful in identifying where do we focus first.
Yeah.
The second thing is our master data management. Our master data hub is what Boomi calls it. But that's been critical as far as that investment. We are looking for the benefits in 2023 and deploying it fully. That will allow us to create golden records, right? And so in our various systems across the board, addresses, names, there's variation in it. What is that golden record to be able to make sure we can contact our members and we're providing their, getting that 360-degree view.
Yeah.
So we've just started down that journey, but there's tons of use cases where we're expecting benefits.
Okay. Well, it sounds like if you're expecting them, and if you don't see them, you'll know where to dig in and ask more questions, essentially.
Right. And
we're
bringing in external talent as well to best leverage those platforms that have the experience. And again, contracting with Boomi, we're bringing an enterprise architect organization to basically making sure we're deploying it in the best manner. We're using the use cases. We're learning from others. And using all those type of capabilities, because quite honestly, my team doesn't have the experience in that area right now.
Well, and there's, with the availability of all this essentially talent as a service, there's less anxiety around that in a way when you can bring in that kind of expertise.
It is. And then the other thing is, whenever we bring these folks in, it's teach us to fish. So we ride shotgun. Yes. So when we set up our cloud environment, we brought in an expert along those lines. But our infrastructure team rode shotgun with them and are now making improvements along with their own certifications.
Yeah.
And the same thing we're doing with data, and also our development team from taking that API-led strategy and building those integrations.
Okay. Which is why you wanted to create it in the first place, right?
Exactly.
So it would be there to be of service to you, your team, and your members. Yeah. Last wrap-up question I have for you. What has being a CIO in your first official CIO role during the pandemic, what has it taught you or changed about your own leadership style?
I would say it's kind of doubling down on some of those fundamentals, right? Okay. So talent is tough to get. Talent is tough to maintain. So making sure that culture, making sure employees are challenged and they're learning to grow, and they want to stay within the organization. You're serving them and providing them the right capabilities.
Right.
I would say the other thing is speed and being nimble and agile wins the day, right? Yes. So from a technology perspective, you have to have the foundation to be able to meet your members where they're at. And you also have to be able, especially in this environment, when it's a whiplash, right? When you're going, let's do loans to let's build savings, build assets, you have to pivot quickly. And so you've got to have partners that can do that with you. You have to have a team that is motivated, passionate to serve members and be able to do it. And I'm fortunate for doing it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of good fortune going around on both sides. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. I've really appreciated having you here.
I really enjoyed it too. So thank you.
Okay. If you joined us late today, you can watch the full episode later today here on LinkedIn, where it'll be pinned at the top of CIO Online, our spot there on LinkedIn for the rest of the day and beyond. But you can also find this interview on CIO's YouTube channel and on CIO.com itself. CIO Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. I hope that you've all enjoyed listening in on today's conversation with CIO Gary Jeter, CTO and EVP Gary Jeter of TruStone Financial Credit Union. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year. 2023 is leaning in on us right now. Our next Leadership Live will be held on January 11th, Wednesday at noon Eastern. And I'll have CIO Kirk Ball, who is with the Giant Eagle supermarket chain, joining me for our first Leadership Live of the new year. Thanks again for joining us and tuning in today. I hope you'll also take a moment to subscribe to CIO's YouTube channel, because heaven forfend you should miss any of our wonderful Leadership Live conversations. Stay well out there, enjoy the holidays, and we'll see you back in the new year. Take care.